Okay, so we discussed about the independent sub-procedure in the last video, and here's the syntax of that. So it starts with the private sub. After that there's a procedure name, and within parentheses there are optional parameter list, and that's completely optional. So with the parentheses you don't have to provide any parameters, but you can. And after that you have all your statements which you want to run every time this procedure gets called, and then the end sub. And the syntax, so there's these definition statements which we just discussed, where it's defined that whenever the procedure is called, do all this. And there's a syntax of the call statement. So I mean, and that's basically when we are trying to call that program. So call the same procedure, and if there are arguments, then pass all the arguments to the procedure as parameters. And and then basically the procedure goes and comes back right to the call statement. Example is given: private sub clear labels, call clear label stuff, which already we saw in use. Now we need to talk about the parameters and arguments. So what are they, and how are they useful, or rather why we need them? So definitions, parameter is just uh, I guess a name or a place to store a data that is passed to the procedure when the procedure is called. So what happens is that in the procedure, uh, you define some parameters. That, let's say this is a procedure to um, calculate um, calculate your GPA, let's say. So to calculate the GPA, you need some information about how many credit hours you took, how many, uh, what is your grade and stuff like that. So and so if you want to write a procedure for that, you will need information about these kind of stuff, like what was your GPA and this and that, how many hours did you take and stuff like that. So, and using those arguments, um, the procedure will calculate whatever you need it to calculate. So I guess the parameters in here are basically the data the procedure needs to function, like again the GPA, hours, and all that. And so when defining a procedure, we have to define the I guess the each and every parameter, like what is its what's it's gonna be named as inside the procedure um, inside the procedure definition. And um, the parameters can be values or they can be references. And we also need to specify the data type of the parameter, like whether it's a string or whether it's a double, decimal, what is it. And now there's parameters and there are arguments, and these are basically kind of like the same thing. um, and so what happens is that when you after you define procedures, its parameters and all that, so in later on you'll call that procedure using the call statement. And within the call statement there's call, then the procedure's name, and then within parentheses there will be arguments, and that will contain some data which will be passed on to the parameters in the procedure. So in your call statement for the GPA, you will pass on how many what GPA you got, how many hours you actually took, and that's your argument. So, and that argument goes to the procedure, and then the procedure uses those information to calculate, I guess, your cumulative GPA or something like that. So arguments is the data given to the parameters of the procedure, and um, by definition, the parameters in the procedure header and those when the procedure is called must have the same number, the same type, and the same order of arguments. So you need to be careful regarding this, that when you're calling a procedure and which requires some like parameters, then you have to put the data in a specific order, in a specific data type, and and has should have a specific number. We'll get very soon into examples of how what I'm trying to say, but before that I need to talk a little more about how to pass like arguments and to procedure parameters. So I mean, when you're passing parameters to the procedure, the parameter itself can be a variable, a constant, keyword, literal constant, etc. And there's two ways of passing these parameters. You can just give a value to the parameter, or you can provide the reference or the memory address of the parameter. So and there's a difference between these two, obviously, otherwise I mean it's two ways of doing the same thing. When you're passing value, the procedure receives only the value and cannot change the actual variable's value. So I mean, if you just want to say to the procedure that this is the value, but I'm not giving you any access to the value or the variable, then you pass by value. So just pass on a number or a string to the procedure to work with. So there's no like connection between the actual variable's memory and the value given to the procedure. So it's like a read-only thing for the procedure. But if you pass a reference, then you're actually um, having a purpose that the variable's value will be changed after the procedure runs. So the procedure receives the address can make changes to the variable's value. Okay, so I think it's high time we look at some examples to actually um, understand what we just talked about. So here is an example of how to pass variables using value. So this application basically highlights or displays your favorite actor or your favorite actress, given that you tell it just that this is my favorite actor or actress. Now it has a radio button, actor and an actress, and a button to display the favorite. Now here we have initially defined the private sub display message independent procedure, and you see there are two arguments here, by val type and by val performer, which are both strings, and the type and performer, both of these are parameters. Okay, they will receive values from the call statement arguments, and these values will be used in the procedure. So once it gets the type and the performer, so it just displays message level. In message level, your favorite, whatever's in type, is whatever's in performer. So it will get the data from the call statement. The first data from the call statement will be its type, and that will be a string, and the next data from the call statement, and by data I mean arguments from the call statement, would be a performer, which would also be a string, and it will only get values from that. It will have no access to the variables which give the value. So then you have the display button click event, and in the display button, if the actor radio button is checked, then the category is actor and the name is just whatever the user enters once the input box comes in, which asks for a favorite actor or favorite actress. Now after that we call the display message procedure. Now you have this argument list, category and name, which were already defined. So category was can be either actor or can be actress, and the name is whatever the user input to the procedure. Now, so the category or the first argument in the call statement is the type parameter in the procedure. So once the program encounters this, it takes in the value whatever's in category, and it might be actor or actress, and takes that string and assigns it to the type string in the procedure, the type parameter. And it takes the name, whatever the user input, and it assigns it to performer and the value of that variable to performer parameter in the display message procedure, which we defined earlier. So I hope this helps clear up what is the relation between the arguments in the call statement to the parameters in the procedure definition statement. So and then the procedure basically takes the category and name as the type and the performer respectively and displays it. And I mean that's all there is to is passing the variables. Again, it's a by val, so the variables is passed only by value. The procedure has no access to the variable category or the variable name, so it cannot change anything, any value stored inside these things. It just uses those values to display a label, display a message in the label. On the other hand, when you're passing variables by reference, you're allowing access to those variables in the to the procedure. So here is the Lanza trinkets application, which we looked at just a while before. Here we have defined a procedure which has three parameters: hours worked, rate of pay, and extra pay. The first two are just take the values of the corresponding arguments. The third one takes the reference or the actual address of the corresponding argument. So if the hours worked is greater than 40, I mean the extra pay variable calculates the um, number of hours worked over 40 and gets the rate of pay and just calculates stuff. So if hours worked is greater than 45, extra pay is this and that and all that. So a lot of logic here, but that's not our focus. So anyways, let's go into the event procedure calculate button. It has hours, rates, regular, overtime, gross. What it does is takes the values from the combo boxes, hours and rates. If the hours is less than equals to 40, then the value for regulars is just hour times rate. Else value for regular is 40 times rate. And then it basically calls the calc overtime procedure, which was defined right at the beginning. And so here hours, the hours argument is the hours worked parameter in the procedure right at the top. So the hours worked parameter takes in the value of hours and assigns it to that hours worked variable. Rate goes into rate of pay parameter, and overtime goes into extra pay parameter in the procedure right at the top. So the procedure has no access to hours or rate, but it can change the value stored in overtime. Initially overtime was just defined as 0, but once this procedure actually executes, overtime is now assigned the value of whatever extra pay is. So once extra pay gets all those hours worked and rate of pay, it calculates stuff and puts that back into overtime. And that's what the use of pass by reference is. So if you want to get some result, you just use a reference to pass, and then that result is assigned into the overtime reference.